Hi, this is Charles Zaleski. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Excellent. Okay. Are we, is the conference started?
Yes, go ahead, Charles. We're ready to go.
Okay. Very good. Sorry for the audio difficulty there. And thank you all for joining. Welcome to Cloudera's webinar. My name is Charles Zaleski. I'm the Vice President of Product at Cloudera. And we're going to talk about Cloudera's distribution, including Apache Hadoop version 3. Thank you all for attending, first and foremost. For today's webinar, what we want to cover is basically the recently released for general availability Cloudera distribution version 3. We want to talk about the kind of problems that we were trying to solve with this latest release of the distribution. We want to walk you through different parts of the distribution and how we think we have solved those problems. And then I'll give you a rundown of some of the new features and capabilities of the distribution. And then we'll close with my presentation with some preview of things to come. All the content that I brought will take about 30 minutes, so we should have plenty of time for questions at the end of the hour. And you can submit your questions whenever you like at the GoToWebinar question panel. And we're going to try to answer as many as possible before the hour is up. Overall, we're aiming to have this presentation last about 45 to 50 minutes. And that would be, and then after that, we're going to have this presentation recorded so that you can always download and review at some later time. So with that, I'm going to dive in. The first thing I want to do for those of you that are, so first some housekeeping. So as I mentioned before, if you have any questions, please use the question panel. If you have any problems, please use the chat panel. And like I said, the slide and recording will be available after the webinar. So for those of you that are relatively new to Apache Hadoop or relatively new to Cloudera, I wanted to start with a basic question which is independent of Cloudera's distribution version 3, which is, what is Cloudera's distribution, including Apache Hadoop? A couple of basic bits of information. Cloudera's distribution is actually made up of Apache Hadoop and related projects. Core code included in Cloudera's distribution is actually sourced directly from the Apache projects. So I think sometimes people are saying, well, how is this distribution somehow different and off from Apache Hadoop? And that's actually not the objective of the distribution. The objective of the distribution is to be the actual code from Apache Hadoop, as well as a number of other components, which I'll get into in a moment. And Cloudera's distribution is actually built and assembled by Apache Hadoop engineers across Apache Hadoop and all of the related Apache Hadoop projects in the ecosystem. Cloudera has more than a dozen engineers who are committers to various projects. But we wanted to create an artifact that was something that would be easy for an enterprise to run in trial or production. And there's a number of different ways that we try to accomplish that. And I'll talk more about that when we talk about version 3. Now, this entire distribution is 100% Apache open source. So in the process of trying to make an artifact which is easier to consume, easier to deploy in production, easier to adopt, we didn't want to deviate from our commitment to open source. And so Cloudera's distribution, including Apache Hadoop, is 100% open source. And what we're most proud of, and really the reason for this webinar today, is that this distribution is now on its third generally available version. So Cloudera has been providing Apache Hadoop distributions for more than 2 years now, and we've been really pleased to see the steady uptick in adoption with each successive version, and we have high hopes for the adoption for CDH3. So let's talk a bit about what we were trying to accomplish with the CDH3. When we started work on CDH3, it was nearly a year ago, and we had just made Cloudera's distribution, including Apache Hadoop, version 2, generally available. And when we embarked upon CDH3, we had 4 goals that we wanted to accomplish. The first 2 goals are goals that we've had since CDH2 and prior, which is we wanted to make Apache Hadoop ever easier to adopt, and we wanted to provide a level of predictability around the artifact that would make it easier for organizations to plan their their maintenance and upgrade cycles on. So if you look at the work we did even back with Cloudera's distribution, including Apache Hadoop version 2, there was already quite a bit of work that went underway here. But our question was, how could we extend even further the ease of adoption of this very powerful data management system? The two other objectives that we set out for ourselves, which were incremental to the scope of our ambition for CDH2, is we wanted to give organizations an integrated or complete data management system that stayed 100% Apache open source. So rather than have to assemble a data management system from multiple different components and piece parts, we wanted to try to take that complexity out of the lives of the end user and provide a single artifact that would be easier to consume. The other big expansion to do a better job of providing a platform that the rest of the enterprise IT ecosystem could integrate with. We had an increasing percentage of Cloudera customers that were more and more typical Fortune 500 companies in non-web industries, customers in financial services or retail or communications or energy or biopharma or media. And these organizations all had lots of other enterprise IT investments. And we wanted to be able to have Apache Hadoop play a role as a first-class citizen in the data center alongside these different investments. So with this in mind, let me dive into the first 2 points, which is how we tried to make Apache Hadoop ever easier to adopt with Cloudera's distribution for Hadoop version 3, and also how we wanted to make it a more predictable artifact as well. One of the things for those of you who've been using Cloudera's distribution for some while, you'll know that even going back to CDH1 and CDH2, we put a lot of energy into ease of adoption. That includes things like packaging. We make it possible to install the system on multiple different operating systems using the package frameworks that they have today. It also includes things like cloud deployment. So we've had cloud scripts that have made it possible for you to spin up an Apache Hadoop cluster on EC2 with very little effort. But we added a number of new artifacts to make Cloudera's distribution and Apache Hadoop itself easier to adopt with CDH3. The principal things that we did were around release cycle and documentation. So around the release cycle, we wanted to create a higher level of predictability than people have gotten in the past from Cloudera's distribution. So in addition to providing a once-a-year generally available release of Cloudera's distribution, we also began the practice of doing regular updates. And the goal for these updates is much like updates that you find in lots of other enterprise or platform technologies, which is that on the one hand, you want to periodically take advantage of lots of big new features that might be require a full upgrade. But at the same time, you also want to be able to get periodic fixes and improvements that close bugs or improve performance. And so we wanted an upgrade cycle to be a part of that process. We started delivering an update cycle, and we started delivering those updates during the course of the time that we were developing CDH3. Going forward, and there'll actually be a blog post coming out on this shortly, our plan is to publish in advance the schedule for quarterly updates for the generally available version. And I'll talk more about what the other plans are for the release cycle. So the update cycle was something we thought was important because we realized that organizations wanted to be able to get incremental improvements easily and only have to plan upgrades periodically. So that was one of the big enhancements in terms of ease of adoption. The other two big enhancements in terms of ease of adoption were around the documentation. So we've always had a pretty rich set of documentation when it comes to installation and configuration, which was fine for folks that were looking to trial the distribution, but really when you're looking to run the distribution in production, you quickly forget about the installation, and you've got lots of other concerns that you addressed. The two that we added for CDH3 was, first off, was a security guide. So as security functionality, in the Hadoop stack has improved over the course of the past 12 months and made its way into Cloudera's distribution, we wanted there to be a single comprehensive security guide where you got a view into all of the different policies and capabilities and security protocols of all the different layers. And that security guide was made available during the beta cycle, and that's now part of the generally available release. The other one, which we just recently added, was known issues and limitations. So when we talked to customers that were running Hadoop in production, they said, hey, it's wonderful that the Hadoop ecosystem is adding functionality at such a prodigious rate to all of these different components in the distribution, but not all of these features are equally well adopted, and not all of them are equally well hardened. And I need to get better visibility into which capabilities of the platform I can really bank on in production, and which ones I should get some advance notice that I probably want to let them spend a little more time on the market, get a little more hardened before I bet on that feature in my production workload. And this type of practice is quite prevalent in lots of other forms of enterprise software, and we wanted to add that for Cloudera's distribution as well. So across all the different components in Cloudera's distribution now, we have known issues and limitations. And our goal is to give you an advanced warning about which features we'd recommend you hold off using in production for the time being. And when we have visibility, we also want to give you an ETA for when we think that limitation will be removed and when you'll be able to safely use that particular feature in production. So we think this is a big step forward in terms of the predictability of the system, especially given the fast rate of innovation that you're seeing from the Apache Hadoop community, which is one of the greatest strengths of the system, which we don't want to lose in the process of creating the distribution. Now, beyond ease of adoption and predictability, I mentioned that there's really two things that we did that really expanded our ambition for what we could do with an Apache Hadoop distribution. The big one was that we wanted to give organizations an integrated, complete data management system that had Apache Hadoop as the kernel of that system. And I think that the best way to describe why we thought that was necessary and valuable is to look back at the organization that spawned what's become this thriving Hadoop ecosystem, which is Google. So if you look at all of the different components today in the Apache Hadoop ecosystem, you can find corollaries to pretty much all of them in Google. And back in 2001, if you looked at how Google started to create its own Hadoop-like infrastructure, it started with the Google file system and MapReduce at its kernel. But over time, it expanded. It expanded to cover things like a key value store or a database on top of the file system. It came to expand to include workflow. It came to expand to include a query language, a data processing language, a coordination service. All of these different types of things grew during the course of the time that Google was growing. And as their systems expanded from simply servicing search index building to the wide variety of different data processing challenges that Google solves today. And if you ever want to get a feel for where the Hadoop ecosystem is going, understanding how Google operates today is probably a pretty good predictor of where the Hadoop ecosystem is going to wind up operating in the near future. To look at some of the large web organizations that are large adopters of Apache Hadoop, you'll see this same pattern repeat itself again and again. So for example, if you look at Facebook, you can see that they also leverage a data ingest framework, much like Google. Google calls theirs Gateway, Facebook calls theirs Scribe. They'd also leverage a query-oriented language. The Hadoop community calls this Hive, whereas the Google might call theirs Dremel. And they'd also leverage a key value store on top of the file system. And in the Hadoop community's case, it's called HBase. And so it goes. Similarly, Yahoo, a very large adopter of Apache Hadoop, a very large contributor to Apache Hadoop, and you see the same or very similar set of components. Maybe some differ. So maybe Yahoo might use a different workflow engine than Facebook, but fundamentally the same problems needed to be solved again. And LinkedIn, another example of an organization that has a large investment in its own data processing infrastructure, and you'll find a whole other collection of components. The names might be different, but they're actually playing extremely similar roles to Yahoo's and to Facebook's. So this is the pattern of this sort of very flexible data management platform that has Apache Hadoop at its core. But whereas for all of these organizations, the common thread is that they've all invested many dozens of software engineers to assemble these systems. We thought that was an unrealistic investment to expect for a typical enterprise organization who is looking to adopt technology and turn it into business value more than they are looking to assemble technology itself. And so for Cloudera's distribution, our goal was to say, what if we could bring together the best of, we can keep Apache Hadoop at the heart of the system, but we could bring together the best of the Apache Hadoop ecosystem and integrate all this together so that organizations didn't have to. And I think we thought that this was going to serve a number of benefits, both in terms of the types of problems that you could solve with Apache Hadoop, and it would also expand the total user base of Apache Hadoop, and it would also lower some of the cost of adoption because all this complexity would be taken away. So if you look at how an artifact like CDH3 gets created now, it's actually a pretty complicated act. We take customer and partner requirements for this system, much like any other organization, any other software company would take requirements. However, then the development is actually done in a very different way. So for Cloudera's distribution, when we have a series of enhancements that we have as an ambition for a given release, we wind up doing most of those enhancements actually out on the individual Apache projects. So for example, a customer said, hey, I really need to have support for Windows. I have lots of data sources for my company, which are coming off of Windows servers, and it's too difficult right now to get them off of Windows servers and into Apache Hadoop. That enhancement was developed as part of the Flume project. And similarly, we have other enhancements. Another customer we had said, hey, I need to be able to load lots of data very quickly into my HBase instance. That work was also done as part of on the trunk of the Apache HBase project. Then as we get closer to wanting to release Cloudera's distribution, what we wind up doing is picking essentially a cut point from each one of these different components. A cut point for MapReduce and HDFS, a cut point for Flume, a cut point for Hive, a cut point for HBase, and so on. And then we bring all these together, we integrate them, and we test them. And in the process of doing so, invariably we find some things that we need to do to make sure that they all work better together. And usually that means that we'll write patches, we'll apply those to the open source projects, and then we'll backport them into Cloudera's distribution. And then we go through a public beta cycle where we're very grateful that we have a large community of Cloudera distribution users that are able to provide their feedback at an early stage in the release. And during that time, there's also more fixes that we'll go through. We spent about 2 months doing nothing but bug fixing and stabilization based on the feedback from the community. And what we'll have in the end is a stable or generally available release, which you'll see in this list right here. And we have a nomenclature that we keep to so that we're completely transparent about what precisely is in Cloudera's distribution. So if you ever need to trace back, you have some, you know how to go about doing that. And you can see that for each one of the components in the system, we have the version, which essentially represents that cut point that I was referring to there, as well as the patches on top, which represents typically, not always, the work of the integration, testing, and backporting to get the system to work well together. So that's essentially the process we need to go through to create this integrated system that is Cloudera's distribution, including Apache Hadoop. So something that has all these components that works well together, but still stay true and traceable to the Apache projects that these components originate from. Now, so just to give you a sense as to how different this is, if you look at CDH2 to CDH3, it's really pretty marked in its distinction. So at the time of CDH2, what you would have found in the distribution was Apache Hadoop, MapReduce, HDFS, and Common. And then you would have found Apache Hive and Fig. And you can see what versions and what patch set that we were doing here. If you look at CDH3 and you look at the sheer breadth of the component set, it's larger than it was previously. So it now added support for Apache HBase, Apache Zookeeper, Apache Whir. It also has support for several other projects which are Apache licensed, although they are not project managed under the Apache project model. And those include things like Flume, Hue, Oozie, and Scoop. And you can also note that for even components that carried on from CDH2 to CDH3, the version and the patch count incremented substantially from one to the next. And I'll talk a bit more about this later on in the presentation. So what? So what's the, great, good for you, Cloudera. You have a lot of components in your distribution. Why do I care about this as an organization? Well, I made one argument, which was that we believe that it would actually simplify an organization to not have to assemble and test and debug these different components together. But another way of thinking about this as an organization is it makes it possible for Apache Hadoop to solve an even broader array of problems than it was able to before. So let's take a let's say canonical example of a Apache Hadoop use case, which is clickstream sessions. So you have lots of website. You want to rebuild all of those different user actions into sessions that you can then do some form of reporting and analysis on. So in order to do that, you have lots and lots of servers generating weblog events. And for some of our customers, that might just be a few dozen servers. For some of our larger customers, that's as many as a few thousand. And you need to be able to reliably collect all of that log data and then move it into files that Hadoop can read before it's possible to do anything else with this information. Well, part of Cloudera's distribution version 3 is a framework for that log collection called Flume. And Flume is able to grab all this log event information from the original source in a way where you in a highly reliable way where you don't have risk of data loss in the process of transport, and also in a low latency way, and in a way where it's horizontally scalable, regardless of the number of servers that you're going to be feeding into your Hadoop system. Flume will then take that data and will store it in the Hadoop file system and periodically close files and make sure that they're in a format that can be read by other parts of the Hadoop stack. And then using something like MapReduce, you would assemble a lot of this log and event information into sessions. So you'll take individual clicks, your clicks will turn into sessions, and then those sessions will look like something that you can more easily represent in a tabular form, right? So we might be storing information about that that table in something like the Hive Metastore. So now we've gone from what was before a series of files with just strings of text with Apache weblogs, and now we've got this nice straightforward table which summarizes user sessions for some range of time. And then let's say that we actually want to do some iterative BI reporting on this, And I also want to commingle this data with lots of other analytic data that I have in my decision support system, my data warehouse. Well, I need to be able to get the data out of Hadoop, land it in my data warehouse, and I want to be able to do some form of analytics over there. And so part of Cloudera's distribution is a database integration framework we added called Scoop. It makes it possible to take table information out of Apache Hadoop and land it in a specific table in your relational database or data warehouse. And then that can join all the other tables you have in your data warehouse, and you can do some form of iterative query and analysis on that information. So that'd be one example of what you can do now that you have all these different components in a Hadoop distribution. Another example, something that folks have done with Cloudera's distribution, is fraud analysis. And in the case of fraud analysis, you might have a situation where you have two different types of data which you're bringing into Apache Hadoop. You have one type of data which is dimension data. So it might be information about customer accounts. It might be information about products. It might be information about a current state of the business. And this information updates rather frequently. And then at the same time, I have lots of observations. So I've got millions and millions, billions and billions of observations that I want to study to find some pattern in terms of fraud. So for the large corpus of information, we can take, let's say, a transactional system or an archive system, again using the Scoop framework, and now we're pulling out of the database and we're integrating it, or we're landing it into the Hadoop distributed file system. But at the same time, we also might want to have another form of integration where we are regularly updating the data in Hadoop as new records change and you need to do lots of inserts and updates, in addition to just big bulk loads of observation data. And for that data, we might land that data in something like Apache HBase, which is also part of Cloudera's distribution. HBase all the same scaling properties as Apache Hadoop, but among other things, a much more mutable way to work with data, so that it's much easier to deal with regularly changing dimension tables. And then let's say that in this case, an organization might have analysts that are most comfortable or familiar with something like Hive, so they could use something like Hive query language to actually do the fraud analytics directly in Hadoop. So I think this is another example where, because of the number of different components and the way they work together in Cloudera's distribution, it's possible to solve a much broader array of problems more quickly without either having to try to build or integrate these components yourself or work with these types of steps offline. The other big change with Cloudera's distribution in 3 was we wanted to provide a platform that the rest of the enterprise IT system could integrate with. What we saw increasingly with how organizations were adopting Apache Hadoop is that it was serving an ever-growing central system that more and more workload was getting added to. So it was essentially starting to exhibit the classic behaviors of platform technology more than it was, an individual component or engine that was powering something else. And as a platform, one of the critical criteria for a platform is how well that platform works with other technologies. And we thought that it was vitally important from our perspective at Cloudera that lots of different technologies be able to work really well with Apache Hadoop. So if you look at the parts of the ecosystem that we prioritized for 3, there were really 3 corners of the ecosystem that we cared about. One that's been around since CDH2 is the underlying operating system. So we want CDH to be available, or Apache Hadoop to be available, with as many different operating systems as possible. So we do an inordinate amount of work in packaging and testing to have a wide variety of versions available. With CDH3, that includes Red Hat, SUSE, CentOS, and Ubuntu. The other two are, which were net new compared to CDH2. One is the database warehouse history. So almost, I say without fail, every one of the customers that Cloudera has a enterprise data warehouse in addition to Apache Hadoop. And it's important that these two systems work well together so that they can continue to get additional value out of a very substantial investment they've made in their data infrastructure. So during the course of last year, you saw a series of announcements from Cloudera and partners like Vertica, Netezza, Teradata, Membase, and others to ensure that this interoperability would work well. If you look at what's available in CDH3, one of the big enhancements for CDH3 to make this possible was framework. That's gone through a substantial series of enhancements. And one of the big enhancements for Scoop was the concept of an adapter framework. So rather than integrate with these different systems generically, we wanted to optimize these integrations because when Hadoop, you're typically dealing with data at very large scale, you wanted to make sure that you could get very high throughput with the systems that Hadoop was interacting with. And each system, like a Teradata or a Vertica, has its own special way where if you want to get really high throughput, there's certain engineering tricks you need to know. And so the Scoop adapter framework made it possible to get to very high throughput integration. And then through build Cloudera has done in conjunction with its partners, we now have an ever-growing set of adapters which can be leveraged to make sure that Apache Hadoop is a good complement to data technology. I think that the other big investment has been in expanding the number of different end-user tools and applications which can be available. From Cloudera's perspective, we see our organization as a platform company and an enabler of lots of other types of tools and applications that are focused on all kinds of different users. And see some of the examples of the tools that are committed to working with Cloudera's distribution, including BI tools, reporting tools, query tools, spreadsheet tools, transform tools, and this list is going to grow. We're in the very beginning of our investment in terms of the diversity of different options that users are going to have to interact with Apache Hadoop. And if you look at the enhancements that we've done in CDH3, there's really three types of enhancements that we've done. One is obviously testing. So we need to make sure that there's a good end-to-end experience between what the end user is trying to do from their client tool and what's actually happening in Apache Hadoop. The second one we've also tried to do more of is drivers. So the driver that would make it possible for a typical BI tool to interact with Cloudera's. And the third area that we've also been working on is language enhancements. So most of the tools and applications that interact with Apache Hadoop do so through high-level language like Hive or Pig. And so as we've worked to try to create a better end-user experience, we've wanted to add enhancements to the underlying language that makes it possible for you to do a more expressive set of things in the end-user tool that your user is comfortable with. So these are the major places where CDH3 was enhanced to play a better role as a platform technology. We have lots of exciting work planned for the course of 2011, much of which will benefit CDH3. So you can expect more tools and applications, more databases, more platform options during the course. Now, I've talked a lot about the high-level themes of what we tried to accomplish in Cloudera's distribution if you compare B3. But I know that many of you that are on this webinar have been paying attention to the beta cycle for CDH3. So you already know that we're trying to provide this integrated system. You already know that we're trying to be a better a better platform for the rest of the enterprise IT ecosystem. But what you're saying is, I'm already adopting this. I'm already running it in production. I want to know what new features are for me if I'm already using Hive, if I'm already using HBase, if I'm already using MapReduce and HDFS. And even for those of you that have just been following along the beta cycle, if you just look at the past 3 to 4 months from beta to generally available for CDH3, there are plenty of new features for each component if you look at where we are at in the early part of the beta process versus where we're at now. On the MapReduce side, just one example is performance. If you look at small job performance, so running small-sized MapReduce jobs on small-sized clusters, that's about 2x faster compared to where it was previously. If you look at file system performance, it's about 20% faster if you just look at file system I/O. HBase, if you look in the past 6 months for HBase, it's made great strides in durability, and that's one of the reasons why it's being deployed in so many production workloads now at so many large organizations like Facebook. And another one, which is one of those that's currently on our list of limitations, but hopefully that limitation will be removed shortly, is cross data center application. So HBase really made tremendous strides in the past 6 months. Hive, very proud of the work that the Hive team has done. Cloudera has played a part in that, but many other folks in the Hive community as well, especially Facebook, of adding capabilities like indexing and columnar storage so that Hive can be ever more performant. The pig community added a number of new features. A good example would be custom partitioners, so you have less chance for skew in your pig workloads. Oozie, something which was, of course, a net new addition to CDH3. Oozie is also improved during the course of the time that CDH3 is in beta. One of the big additions for Oozie has been a event-based and time-based scheduler or coordinator, so that you can now launch complex workloads in Apache Hadoop and do that based on the availability of specific data or based on a recurring cycle. Flume, again, a net new component for Cloudera's distribution. So the whole existence of Flume is an enhancement compared to CDH2. But again, if you're already following Flume, if you're already using Flume, two notable enhancements just in the past few months: support for Windows data sources, and an improved metrics framework if you're looking to introspect the performance of Flume. Scoop, again, a net new component, but one of the big additions since Scoop joined CDH3 has been the support for incremental import and export of data. So if you have, for example, some key dimension table in a transactional system that you want to periodically watch for differences and update inside of Hadoop, this is possible today. Or if you have the results of a data processing job and you want to regularly re-export that back into your data warehouse, this sort of thing is possible as well. And then there are a number of things that we did during the course of the CDH3 cycle which really are relevant top to bottom through the whole stack. And in the future, if you look at CDH4, you're going to see more and more enhancements in this bucket. Our goal is to have as many good cross-cutting capabilities so that while individual components in the system get better on their own, that there's also certain enhancements which get better collectively. Some examples of that are authentication. This was something which started in MapReduce and HDFS, that you now had a more secure form of authentication. This is now something which has been extended to work well, regardless of whether you're in HBase or whether you're in Flume or whether you're in Scoop. And then we've also expanded the number of deployment options. That's also something which is equally valid across all the components in the CDH stack. That included support for SUSE Linux. It also included support for Red Hat Enterprise Linux 6. And it also included support for Apache Maven. So for those of you that are using Apache Hadoop in your development project, and you want to make some set of components in Cloudera's distribution part of your Maven dependencies, you can do this as well. So a little bit about what's next for CDH4. So the development work for CDH4 has already begun, and you will see most of that work being done on the underlying Apache or on the underlying Apache projects. There are four big themes that we're focused on for the next version of Cloudera's distribution, including Apache Hadoop. The first theme is improved availability. We want to make it possible to run the entire Hadoop system in a highly available way. The second major theme is to lower the total cost of ownership of Hadoop in production through better harmonization. In other words, by making more parts of the system consistent, by making fewer parts of the system have overlap, we're going to be able to make it much less expensive to operate the system in production. Third big theme will be performance. Everyone loves performance. Hadoop can always be more performant in terms of the amount of time it takes to process a given amount of data. Also in that same vein would be more efficient in terms of the number of nodes you need to process that data. And we have lots of performance enhancements planned for CDH4 timeframe. And then the other, and last but definitely not least, is we're going to continue to invest in expanding the community of users that can work with Apache Hadoop. So from developers to business analysts to business users to data scientists to statisticians, we want as many different possibilities in terms of folks that can run workloads in Apache Hadoop. So you're going to see lots more investment, engineering investment from Cloudera in that area. We also plan to make the system even more easy to adopt, even more easy to try, and even more predictable. So you're going to see some improvements in the release practice as we go from CDH3 to CDH4. One of the things you'll see is a shorter public beta cycle. And the second thing you're going to see is the quarterly updates are going to become more substantial. We're going to be providing not just bug fixes, but some enhancements in the quarterly update process. And you can expect a blog post about this in the near future. But the goal is to be able to give some of the enhancements that are going to come in CDH4 earlier in the CDH3 timeframe, but only in such a way where we're never breaking compatibility and we're never creating the disruption of a full upgrade. So that concludes my presentation. I see some questions have already assembled in the panel, and so I want to dive into some of those, as I think I probably ran a little bit over on my time. So one question that I see here is, can the commercial databases, such as Vertica, Teradata, Greenplum, etc., be used in place of HBase in the examples that you gave? Well, let's just go back to that example really briefly so that we're clear about what we're talking about. So in this case, what we're doing is we're taking regularly changing data, which is maybe a fraction of the overall analysis, and we're doing that data inside of, we're putting that data inside of HBase. At the same time, we're also putting other data inside of HDFS. But now we're running one MapReduce job or one collection of jobs across both sets of data. So in this situation, if you say, well, what if I leave that one dimension table in Vertica and then leave all the fact data in the file system, and I try to run one MapReduce job that spans the two, unfortunately, that's probably not a realistic deployment option. Because, again, remember that one of the key principles of Hadoop is data locality, the idea that you don't want to be shuffling lots of data around in the process of doing a single analysis. So if you're in the middle of a MapReduce job, it's pretty unlikely that you're going to do this kind of a thing. So it's more going to be a sync in this case than it is going to be some kind of a cross-system integration. But that said, there's lots of other good scenarios, like this first one I gave, where we do have good examples of Apache Hadoop integrating with the systems you refer to, like Teradata and Vertica. So let me go through the next set of questions that I see here. Another question that we saw was, I'm on CDH2, and how much work is involved in upgrading from CDH2 to CDH3? So the answer is not much. We have an upgrade guide which you can find if you go to downloads.cloudera.com and go to documentation. But in addition to that, I can say that from practical experience, having seen a number of customers do this upgrade now, that a typical upgrade is measured in hours, not days. So you do need to plan ahead, especially if you're coming from CDH2, because some of the user group model is different now than it was previously. But that's really the main distinction from an upgrade perspective. So let me look here for some more questions. So another question that we also see here was related to which integrations that was referred to are actually available today. So let me go back to that slide just so that you get a feel for what we're referring to. So we have a wide variety of different parts of this ecosystem which we've tied into. And many of these are announced, and then bit by bit these have been delivered in conjunction with CDH3. In terms of all the different operating systems, all of this is available today. Cloudera's distribution can run on every one of these OS variants that you see here. In terms of the end user tools and applications, with the exception of the ETL tools, pretty much all of these are available in some form or fashion today. If you want more information about these, you should about a particular integration, you can reach out to the partners if you're already a customer of one of these individual tools. Or you could also just send a note to info@cloudera.com, and then you could find out more from Cloudera. If you look at the optimized integrations to these databases, the integration to Vertica is available today. An optimized adapter for Netezza is available in beta, and an adapter for Teradata is going to be available in the next few months. And then the rest of this list are integrations which are still work in progress. So let's take another moment to get to pull up a few more questions that we've gotten from the audience. So one more question that we got was related to if you're using some other version for Apache Hadoop, what's possible in terms of moving over to the generally available version of CDH3. So again, because Cloudera's distribution is Apache Hadoop, it means that it's not going to be that onerous if you're on some other version or distribution of Apache Hadoop, because we're all ultimately drawing from the same source and functionality. That said, we do plan to add a blog post in the near future where we'll talk more about how you can plan such a migration from one version to the next when you haven't been leveraging some of Cloudera's packaging. Okay, so another question from the audience is, does CDH3 have redeployment support either web-based or using Fabric, Capistrano, Puppet, etc.? So I'm familiar with some of these features or some of these tools, but not all of these tools. And in general, because the components in Cloudera's distribution are packaged, to work on various operating systems. If you want to leverage a package deployment tool like a Puppet, that's perfectly valid. There's nothing wrong with doing this. Another question that we also got was, is there any work in progress on the entitlement features, either in HDFS or HBase or both? So I'm going to interpret the word entitlement to mean authorization. So again, for those of you who are security buffs, you'll know that there's authorization, meaning what are you allowed to do, and then there is authentication, which is are you who you say you are when you claim to want to be able to do something. Now, if you look at the major enhancement to security in the Hadoop ecosystem, it's really been around authentication. But there have been some small enhancements to authorization today, and there are some other ones which are coming in the near future. The one which is available today is there actually is some improvement in terms of the availability of ACLs for MapReduce. And that's something which was not available previously. So you can now apply access control lists to different scheduler queues. The other one which is available but currently under the list of limitations, so we didn't recommend using this in production, is there is an authorization model which has been added for Hive. We do anticipate that an authorization model will be added for HBase, but probably this will be in the CDH4 timeframe. So I'm getting a note that we're at the end of the hour, and I need to conclude the webinar. I appreciate you attending, and I appreciate all of your good questions. And I hope that you get a chance to try Cloudera's distribution. If you go to downloads.cloudera.com, regardless of your type or flavor of deployment, we hope that you give it a chance, and we hope that you get advantage of all the work that we put into this open source system. Thanks for participating, and please check Cloudera.com for future events.